There is a saying in the villages of old India that fire does not merely destroy. Fire reveals. What it cannot burn, it purifies. What it cannot purify, it transforms. And what it transforms, it offers to the gods. This is the story of Meera, a young bride who arrived at her husband's home carrying nothing but hope, a copper pot her mother had pressed into her hands at the doorstep, and a wedding sari the color of a monsoon sky deep blue, with borders of gold thread that caught the light like fireflies. She did not know, as she crossed that threshold with her head bowed and her heart singing, that by nightfall the sari would be ash, and that the gods who miss nothing were already watching. Meera was 18 years old when she married Arjun, the third son of the Sharma household in the village of Chandrapur. Arjun was a kind man, quite gentle, the sort of man who rescued birds that had fallen from nests. She had seen him only twice before the wedding, both times briefly, both times with a dozen relatives watching. But she had liked his eyes. They were honest eyes. His mother, Sumitra Devi, was another matter entirely. Sumitra Devi was a woman built from old grievances. She had ruled the Sharma household for 30 years with the certainty of someone who believed the world owed her a debt. When Meera stepped across the threshold, Sumitra Devi looked her up and down the way a trader examines a suspicious coin, turning her gaze slowly, searching for flaws. Sumitra Devi, so this is what they sent. A thin girl from a poor family with city ideas. We shall see how long those ideas last. Meera kept her eyes low and said nothing. Her mother had prepared her for this. Silence is not weakness. Her mother had whispered the morning of the wedding. Silence is the river learning the shape of the mountain before it decides where to flow. The first weeks were a test that never announced itself as a test. Meera was woken before sunrise to draw water from the well. She swept the courtyard in the cold morning air while Sumitra Devi watched from the doorway, pointing out every grain of dust she had missed. She cooked rotis and was told they were too thick. She made dal and was told it was undersalted. She arranged flowers at the small household shrine and was told her offerings were careless. Arjun saw all of this. In the evenings when they were alone, he would sit beside her in the small room that was theirs and speak softly. Arjun, she was not always this way. She is afraid, I think, of losing control of this house, of being replaced in it. Meera, I have not come to replace anyone, Arjun. I have come to build a home. He looked at her for a long moment and then nodded. As though she had said something, he had been trying to find the words for his entire life. But kindness from a husband is a thin shield against a mother-in-law who has decided, before you arrived, that she will not be moved. It was the festival of Tej, the celebration of the goddess Parvati, who had fasted and prayed and endured great suffering before Lord Shiva finally recognized the devotion she carried for him. On this day, married women dressed in their finest clothes and gathered to sing and pray for the long life of their husbands and the strength of their marriages. Meera rose early. She bathed in cold water and combed her hair with the careful attention of a woman who takes small rituals seriously. Then she opened the iron trunk at the foot of the bed and took out her wedding sari, the blue one with the gold border. She had worn it only once, on her wedding day. She had kept it folded in a cotton cloth, pressed with dried neem leaves to keep the insects away. It still smelled faintly of jasmine and turmeric, and the morning of the happiest day of her life. She was draping it carefully around herself when Sumitra Devi walked into the room without knocking. Sumitra Devi, what do you think you are doing? Meera, dressing for the Tej Puja, Mataji. I thought. Sumitra Devi, you thought. This girl thinks. And in what tradition does a daughter-in-law of this house dress herself in display silks to parade around the village while there is still work to be done in this courtyard? Meera, the puja is at midday, Mataji. I will have finished my work by then. Sumitra Devi moved then with a swiftness that left no time for understanding. She crossed the room, took the free end of the sari that Meera had not yet draped, and pulled. The fabric came loose in a single motion. Meera reached for it. Sumitra Devi was faster. She walked to the courtyard where the cooking fire still burned from the morning meal, and she threw the sari into the flames. The blue silk caught immediately. The gold threads glittered briefly. One final, heartbreaking moment of beauty, and then the fabric darkened and curled and was gone. Meera stood at the doorway of the courtyard in her underskirt and blouse. She did not cry. She did not scream. She watched the fire consume the last physical memory of her wedding morning, and she felt something settle inside her. Something very deep and very still, the way a stone settles to the bottom of a river and simply waits. Sumitra Devi, now go and put on something plain and finish sweeping the back courtyard. There is no Tej Puja for women who have not yet earned the right to celebrate. Arjun came home to find Meera sitting in the courtyard in the dark. Not weeping, just sitting, her hands folded in her lap, looking at the place where the cooking fire had been. She told him what had happened in a voice so calm, it frightened him more than tears would have. He stood very still for a long time. Then he sat beside her on the ground, in the dirt of the courtyard, in his good clothes from the workday, and he took her hands in his. Arjun, I am sorry. I am so sorry. I did not protect you and I should have. What can I do? Meera, nothing tonight. Tonight, I only want to sit here for a little while longer. So they sat together in the courtyard in the dark, and above them, the sky was full of stars. And somewhere in the deep, listening silence of that night, something ancient stirred. Because the gods do not sleep during Tej. On this night of all nights, the night sacred to Parvati, who had herself endured humiliation and exile and suffering before justice arrived, they were awake, and they had seen what was done to the sari. They had seen Meera's face, and they were not indifferent. 3 days after the sari burned, a letter arrived at the Sharma household. It was from the city of Lucknow, from a merchant house that Sumitra Devi's eldest son Vikram had been trying to do business with for 2 years. They had always refused. The Sharma name was not large enough, the family not connected enough. The letter said they had changed their mind, and the reason they gave was Meera. Because Meera, it turned out, was the niece of Govind Prasad, a name Meera had never thought to mention and the family had never thought to ask about. Because Meera was quiet and poor and from a small village, and nobody had imagined she might be connected to anyone of importance. Govind Prasad was one of the most respected cloth merchants in all of Uttar Pradesh, and he had heard through the patient network of relatives and neighbors and village gossip that moves through India like water through roots, that his niece had been humiliated in her new home, that her wedding sari had been thrown into a fire. He had not sent a complaint. He had not sent a warning. He had simply written a letter to every merchant family in the region, withdrawing the considerable favor of his recommendation from the Sharma household and redirecting it elsewhere. Within the week, 2 business agreements Sumitra Devi's sons had been building for years quietly collapsed. The family came to understand what had happened gradually, the way the cold comes, not all at once but in small, undeniable increments, until one morning you simply cannot pretend it is still warm. Vikram sat his mother down at the kitchen table and explained it to her plainly. Vikram, the daughter-in-law you humiliated on the night of Tej is the niece of Govind Prasad, the merchant we have been trying to reach for 2 years. He knows what you did to her sari. The whole region knows. And now so do the people whose business we needed. Sumitra Devi sat in silence for a very long time. The silence of a woman who has spent 30 years being certain and has encountered, for the first time, the full consequence of her certainty. She looked across the courtyard to where Meera was hanging, washing on the line, quietly, methodically, the way she did everything, without complaint, without drama, without any of the performance of suffering that Sumitra Devi herself had always relied upon. And something in the old woman cracked open. Not repentance exactly, not yet, but the beginning of it. The hairline fracture that, if you tend it right, can eventually become understanding. A month later, a parcel arrived for Meera from Lucknow. Her uncle had sent it. Inside, wrapped in muslin and tied with a red string, was a sari. It was blue, deep blue, the color of a monsoon sky, with a border of real gold thread, not the imitation kind, but the kind that is woven by hand by craftsmen who have done nothing else their entire lives. It was worth more than anything the Sharma household owned, and folded inside it was a letter in her uncle's handwriting that said only fire destroys, dignity rebuilds. You were always worth more than they knew. Now they know. Wear it to the next festival. Wear it proudly. Meera held the sari for a long time. Then she folded it carefully, wrapped it back in its muslin, and placed it in the iron trunk at the foot of the bed. That evening, Sumitra Devi came to her room. She stood at the door, the same door she had always walked through without knocking. This time she knocked. Sumitra Devi, may I come in? Meera looked up. She studied the old woman's face. The lines of it, the weight of 3 decades of struggle written into the skin around her eyes. She thought about her mother's words, about rivers and mountains. Meera, yes, Mataji, come in. Sumitra Devi sat on the edge of the bed. She did not apologize immediately. She was not yet a woman who found apology easy. But she set something on the bed between them, a small, old bangle, tarnished silver, the kind a woman passes down. Sumitra Devi, this was my mother's. She gave it to me when I married. I never gave it to any of my daughters-in-law. I was protecting it. I told myself that. She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. Meera understood. She picked up the bangle. She slipped it onto her wrist. And for the first time in the months she had lived in that house, the two women Saturday together in a room in something approaching, not warmth yet, but its possibility. People often ask what it means when we say the gods answered. We imagine lightning. We imagine a voice from the sky. We imagine punishment delivered swiftly and obviously, the way it happens in stories told to children. But the gods who answered on the night of Tej were subtler than that. They worked through a merchant's letter, through a network of whispered stories passed from village to village, through the slow, patient mechanism of a young woman who refused to become bitter, and an old woman who had just enough love left in her to crack open when it mattered. Meera wore the blue sari to the next Tej festival. The whole village saw her, and the gold threads caught the light, just as they had on her wedding day, like fireflies, like a small, quiet miracle. Because fire does not merely destroy. Fire reveals, and what it reveals. If you're patient, if you're still, if you trust the deep listening silence of the night, the gods will not let remain in ashes. This has been a tale from the ancients. If this story moved something in you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And remember, karma does not always arrive like thunder. Sometimes it arrives like a letter, quietly, exactly on time. Until next time.